We talked about this in a
Last
previous
week,
podcast, but we're playing this for a reason because we want to, at Mark and the Millennials, show a compare and contrast between two black politicians. First, Ayanna Pressley, a Democrat from Massachusetts, who had an interview on AM Joy, and Ayanna Pressley talks about her support of unrest in the streets and says it should continue. And we're going to compare Ayanna Pressley, a sitting United States Congresswoman from Massachusetts, with a candidate for Congress of the United States, Kimberly Klacik. One's a Democrat and one's a Republican. First, let's hear Ayanna Pressley, the Democrat. Here's a clip of her.
I'm looking to the public. You know, this is as much about public outcry and organizing and mobilizing and applying pressure so that this GOP-led Senate and that these governors that continue to carry water for this administration, putting the American peoples in harm's way, turning a deaf ear to the needs of our families and our communities, hold them accountable. Well, make the phone call, send the email, show up. You know, there needs to be unrest in the streets for as long as there's unrest in our lives. And unfortunately, there's plenty to go around.
So that's Ayanna Pressley saying there should be unrest in the streets to hold politicians accountable. But what she's referring to, Ayanna, is Congressman Pressley. She's referring to President Trump. She's referring to the Republicans. The President of the United States and Republicans don't control these cities.
No.
The politicians who run these cities and control these cities, as we have said on Mark and the Millennials ad nauseum, are the Democrats, and they've controlled them for many years.
There is only one city in the top 50 largest cities in the United States that has a Republican mayor, and it's Miami.
Yes, and Miami actually is interesting because as a city, they have multiple mayors because the city is not this massive, there are lots, Miami is kind of a megalopolis, right, that kind of runs together with other towns and cities.
Towns and suburbs.
And so they have mayors in these other places that you would think, well, gee, I think the mayor of Miami actually is the mayor of this area over here. It's not.
Yeah.
But that's because of the Cuban-American influence there, who tend to be
very
overwhelmingly Republican.
Yes, I mean, most of them escaped the very regime type that, several prominent politicians, including one of the people who was nominated at the convention that we talked about earlier, wishes the United States was.
Exactly right. And Ayanna Pressley, whom you just heard, who said she thinks there should be unrest in the streets, we're going to compare her words with Kimberly Klacik, who wants to be in Congress. Kimberly Klacik is a congressional candidate. She's a Republican, and she's black, and she's running, of all places,
in Baltimore City,
Congress in Baltimore City, a place where the Democrats have controlled the city basically, I think, for 53 years.
I think there hasn't been a Republican mayor there since 50-something, 1950-something.
It's just unbelievable how long it's been. And so the Democrats have been in control in Baltimore, not just of the mayor's office, but also the city council office. And the bottom line is things continue to get worse and worse. So Kimberly Klacik, I want the podcast listeners to know, we interviewed her several months ago, right here at Mark and the Millennials, in person, throughout the entire podcast. And it was a terrific interview. And I think we recognized then that this was a candidate that deserves national recognition if only Republicans would open their eyes and start listening. So Kimberly decided, in my opinion, after she left here, that she agreed and she made her own video, and it's fantastic, absolutely fantastic. And we have a clip of the video that she made that has gone absolutely viral. And you have to listen to this and watch it if you can. If not, just listen to it. Here is the clip.
The Democrat Party have betrayed the black people of Baltimore. If the politicians walk the streets like I do, they would see exactly how their policies and corruption affects us. But they don't want to see it. They don't want you to see this. Go to any Baltimore neighborhood and ask this question. Do you want to defund the police?
No.
No.
Absolutely not. I had 3 sons killed in Baltimore City. And I think if we defund the police office, it's going to be worse than that. So no, I'm opposed to that.
What are you going to defund the police for? Why? How do you defend your city, your community? Families are losing people.
It's not just Baltimore. The worst place for a black person to live in America is a Democrat-controlled city. It's 2020. Name a blue city where black people's lives have gotten better. Try. I'll wait.
Yep, name a blue city where black people's lives have gotten better. And Kimberly says, I'll wait. That's Kimberly Klacik. She's running for Congress in the state of Maryland, specifically in the city of Baltimore. And she's walking in West Baltimore. And while she's walking and talking in this commercial, you see the blight that is everywhere. Some 17,000 homes are vacant just in that section alone in Baltimore City, let alone the other part of the city. And she's walking through it. And what does she do? She decides to randomly talk to individuals living in West Baltimore, all black, and say to them, hey, what do you think about defunding the police? And in each case, the person said, that makes no sense. That's crazy. How are we going to protect ourselves? One man said, I've lost 3 sons to violence in Baltimore.
Yeah, Baltimore City is one of the worst cities in terms of violent crime rates and murders. Just per capita individual statistics, I mean, I think it's like 7 people get shot in Baltimore in a week, I think is the statistics or something like crazy like that.
It's certainly one of the murder capitals of the United States, right?
Oh yeah, at least in the top 10.
Without question. So Kimberly is black. She's running for Congress. She is a Republican, and she's walking through the town. And of course, as you can imagine, that in and of itself, because she's very attractive, is probably somewhat dangerous, especially in West Baltimore. And you have to say to yourself, you know what? This is someone that deserves national recognition, because they're talking about the fact that you have this city that's been in decay for many decades, continues to get worse, population continues to decline, tax rates continue to increase, businesses continue to leave, and she's like, well, why wouldn't you just try something else? Why wouldn't you try something new? So Kimberly Klacik, as a result of that video, which went viral, she was invited on Laura Ingram's show on Fox News, and just last night, and she was interviewed by Laura Ingraham, and we have a clip on that, and you've got to listen to it. Here it is.
In Baltimore City, especially where I was in those videos, the Penn North Corridor, billions of dollars of federal funds was sent to that area, and here it is in 2020, it still hasn't made it to the ground. And so from what I can see, the Democrat Party loves to leverage the urban struggles and annually ask for more federal funds, but then they actually don't, remedy the problems and say, this is what we're going to do. No one follows up on it, and I think people just accept it at this point. And I think now we're at a point where people are saying, you know what, maybe I won't vote down ballot. Maybe I'll take a look at other options. And I have to say, going through the city, I've been in West Baltimore for over a year now, just talking to people about what the issues are. And I ask them, I say, hey, you know what, why haven't you ever voted for a Republican or something different? And a lot of people will say, you're the first Republican I've ever met.
So interestingly enough, she's basically saying something that we all know, but we don't want to talk about, which is Republicans, as a rule, won't go into the neighborhoods, in some cases, even in the neighborhoods that are in their own districts, and knock on doors because they're afraid of going into neighborhoods and having someone who is a minority or what have you close the door on them or say, why are you here? I can't stand you. You're a Republican. This doesn't happen. I want you to know this. From my own personal experience, I've never had that happen. And I'm one of those guys that will go into those neighborhoods and does go into those neighborhoods and has done so many times, knocked on doors, and I've had the same reaction, which is...
You're the first one I've ever met.
You're the first Republican that's ever come into this district. In fact, you are the first politician to ever run and knock on my door, period.
Yeah.
And she's actually doing it.
Yeah, I think this is one of the things lost on a lot of politicians that kind of irks me, is that people just tend to move to their corners and kind of accept a lot of the stereotypes of how certain demographics vote, and it's like, if you want to broaden the tent, you want to bring people into your movement, you've got to actually contend with them, discuss the issues with them, see what they want. I mean, you as a representative, your job is to represent the people of your district, so you have to hear what they're saying. You can't just take their votes and then run on your own agenda,
Absolutely.
So I thought it was fantastic in ad. I went about as viral could have gone. So I think I saw a cool little metric when comparing.
And still increasing, like by the hour, as we speak right now.
I think millions of people have viewed it. So they did a comparison between the Michelle Obama primetime DNC speech and its online internet traffic, and the Kimberly Klacik speech, or her advertisement. It wasn't a speech, but the amount of viewership on her ad far and away blew away the Michelle Obama DNC speech on
No way.
online traffic. Yeah, and
Really?
it very much wasn't close.
Wow.
Yeah, it's that viral. I mean, she was making the rounds. I mean, even the president retweeted it and thought it was excellent. Somebody like Kim is definitely a rising star in the GOP. It's a shame that her district is the victim of absurd gerrymandering. It's drawn in a way to make it uncontendable for Republicans. But people like her are important to continue to bring around the message of free market principles in minority communities. And somebody like her should, no matter what happens, continue to elevate her voice, and the Republican Party would be wise to help her do that.
Good point. And by the way, Michelle Obama, you mentioned Michelle Obama, when she spoke last night and gave all of her support for Joe and so forth, Kimberly actually mentioned in this interview with Laura Ingraham, she said, Michelle Obama is talking about how awful it is for black people in these communities, like the community in which I was walking and the one that I want to represent. She says, but Michelle Obama is saying this from her $9 million mansion in Martha's Vineyard.
Yeah.
And she's so disconnected. Michelle Obama, is so disconnected from these communities, and her husband had 8 years to fix it.
Yeah.
He had 8
and a
years
lot of
to do stuff.
these issues all predate Trump. You can't wake up one morning and say, everything was great, and then Trump was elected, and suddenly all of our cities blew up. Like, it's just not true. And it's not, how politics works. And like Clem says, it's very disingenuous.